We're just going to move on to the first panel. I would like to call Kate Burns up to act as moderator for this panel. Kate, I need to know introduction probably to anybody in the room, but I'm also very proud to say she's on the advisory panel for the IOLN. So Kate, if you'd like to come up, and I will email out the Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland survey results on ocean literacy to everybody if they would like. And I'm sure if you have any questions or queries, I could be able to take you in touch with you or Norman. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you. And I'm just going to speak for 5 minutes because I'm supposed to be getting other people to speak and making life difficult for them. But just by way of introduction, yeah, I'm Kate Burns. I'm supposed to be retired, but yeah, I'm from Rathlin Island and have a long connection with the sea over many interesting years of work. So I've done a lot of work for Bordish Gawara. I've done coastal planning strategies for them. I've done leader rural development plans. I was CEO of the cross-border body ICBAN for 4 years and managed Interreg 3A funds. I have some interesting perspectives and memories around cross-border work and interest in marine matters from them. But maybe I'll reflect on those during kind of some of the question and answer sessions we would have. Yeah, I've also, I mean, I have a kelp farm in Rathlin Island, and that was my son's fishing boat, which was in Hugh's presentation. I have a family who are very engaged, involved in the marine economy and conservation. And also I've been involved in maritime heritage. I've been in the Causeway Coast Maritime Heritage Group for 27 years, and I've done a lot of rowing and sailing. So kind of, yeah, it's certainly in the DNA. But equally, you know, as I sit and look at the attendance here today, despite all the effort and all the activities, we have an awful lot of work to do. And you know, this ocean literacy needs to belong to a broad spectrum of society and stakeholder interests. You know, it needs to belong to the commercial sector, to the fishing sector, to the tourism sector, you know, and so often with these really important sustainability drives, we end up dependent or back with the people with the passion for conservation in the environment. And you know, the drivers to date has been passion, not policy. Yeah, we've got the result of the survey, but what is that doing? What is that doing to help drive change? So, you know, and also, you know, the main work is being done by people as opposed to politicians. Having said that, we are in a place north and south politically from terms of ministers where we have ministers with an interest and a commitment on these issues. And we maybe haven't had that for a long time. And I'm not afraid to talk politically about these things because I don't answer to any political paymasters. And I could say more, but yeah, we're in a better place. And, you know, talking about my past, there's friends, colleagues here from years back, Andrew Ward and Kevin Wilson, who I worked with in the 1990s around cross-border rural development with a strong marine theme in the late 1990s. And we had brilliant projects and brilliant ideas. And in a way that wasn't grasped as it could have been. And I saw so many projects over the year funded with EU programmes, invasive species programme, and the EU money stops and the project stops. And I think that bugbear of projects only having a value as long as they get EU funding is one of the banes of my life and my memory of my working days, you know, is that. So, you know, here we are, the decade of the sea, the decade of the oceans. And, you know, it's wonderful what we have as a country, Ireland, north and south, and so many good people, but we do have a lot of work to do. And so my appeal to people after today is take what you're hearing from the speakers, from the conversations we're going to have, and also just the evidence to go out and bring people into this conversation where you can. So I'm going to ask the speakers to come up. I actually would have preferred just to have been up in a row rather than one at a time. Kat, is that okay? If all the speakers come up in one go?
Yeah, they're all going together.
Yeah, so, and really, okay, the speakers can talk about their experiences, but I want the speakers to also ask you, the audience, at the end. We want to have a conversation here. We want to know what the challenges and the questions in your minds are, and that collectively in this room we can help explore those and think about solutions. So anyway, we have Erin McKeown from the RSPB. We have Ciara Brennan from EJNI, Andrew Ward from the Inishowen Partnership, and Aoife Ní from IOLN, and Sarah McLean. We do have apologies from Heather Ritchie and Peter Sean from MAFB. So. Okay, so I'm going to start. I'm going to ask each of you then just to do 10 minutes or whatever you feel comfortable with. I'm not sure, is anybody using presentations? Yeah. Okay, it's all set up. Will you want?
Do you want to do it from the lectern?
Of course, yeah, no problem. Well, thank you. Only two very quick slides as well, but hopefully paints a bit of a picture of some of the things I just wanted to touch on. Hi, everybody. Just in case anybody doesn't know me, my name's Erin. I work for the RSPB, Royal Society for the Protection of Birds. I'm a senior marine and seabird policy officer, but I'm also currently at the moment working and supporting the Life Raft project on Rathlin Island, which is a really large, ambitious island restoration project working to remove invasive non-native species from the island, and with that, hopefully restore nature and a really big focus on the seabird colonies there. When asked to touch on cross-border and experiences there, the first kind of species that came into my head that I think really encapsulates the need to be working across the island were our terns. So terns are a really fascinating seabird species. They almost display kind of like a meta population when it comes to breeding. So unlike many seabirds that will maybe return to one colony year on year, sometimes with the terns, they won't always return to the same place, but they really rely on a network of suitable breeding habitat. And that's what we really see with tern species here on the island of Ireland. From Larnloch all the way down to Rockabill, we kind of have these network of terns using this space. They are a very vulnerable species at the same time, so we are doing some work now to conserve them. And a big project that's really just kind of starting to take off, that I know there'll be some folk in the room that are familiar with this, is CMAP, which is an SEUPB funded project. It's led by Ulster University. And as part of that, RSPB are a partner, and we're a partner alongside a whole host of other amazing organisations. But with this work in particular, we're doing some work with National Trust, but also in terms of cross-border, County Louth Council, which has some really important sites for terns too. So we're working to really do practical conservation, but a massive element of this project is to engage people in these species and really highlight why it's so important to be engaging across border, and how these species, they don't see borders and they rely on us not thinking that way either. And we can already kind of see from Irish folklore, common terns regarded as a sign of good fishing season to come. People do have that connectivity and that relationship already with these species, but we're really trying to see how we can enhance that. And we were asked just to think about kind of barriers with this work, and then also what's maybe been an opportunity or what's worked well so far. For barriers, it maybe seems like a silly or a very obvious one, but the first thing we really came across when we sat down to look at this was what are we all doing across the island? We're sometimes very siloed, or I know, for our work in the north, very site-focused, reserve-focused. These are our areas. This is where we'll do our conservation. And it took a bit of time, even sitting down with Louth County Council and some of the projects that were happening in that area, for us to realise what exactly is going on. So there was a bit of work to do there and kind of get out of that site-focus to that kind of seascape level conservation, which is what we really want to achieve. We realised that there was historically an all-island tern forum that it operated. Unfortunately, it hasn't operated in a few years and it's kind of been disbanded. And I guess we find as staff move on, roles change, and when we're not communicating across the whole island, these things fall off. So through CMAP, a real priority will be re-establishing this forum, but I guess it's just an acknowledgement that it's a shame that we have to kind of duplicate this work again that took a lot of effort in the first place when we could be getting on with other elements. So really thinking about how we drive that motivation and now maintain this forum long term. And another quick barrier that I'd have to mention on the policy side is policy itself sometimes can be a bit of a barrier. And north-south, we have slightly different legislation, different timelines and different priorities coming through in our policies. So, for example, here in Northern Ireland, there's a draft seabird conservation strategy that's in the works. And there is relative strategies in the Republic as well, but not an exact of that. So when we've got these policies, that just means the funding priorities are different, the governments are seeing different things, and it really puts a barrier on driving action. So again, another element of CMAP is going to be an all-island turn action plan coming from that. That's a big objective for us. But even after the project, and I know you noted on that, Kate, these kind of funded projects and then it ends, is how we get that ownership and kind of leading that on. And then when it just came to thinking about what's worked so far, we're really early days in this project. So I'm sure there'll be a lot more to learn. And that is maybe what I'm excited to kind of listen to today. Maybe people have been doing a lot more consistent cross-border work and will be part of the question that I want to put out is how can we make a project like this work? But I think so far, and it'll seem again like an obvious one, but communication at the earliest point, meeting in person, always great to have meetings where you have an action or something coming off the back of it. But even if you can't do that, just meeting to talk and to collaborate. And what we're finding now is really important is just noting what all the benefits so far from the cross-border work are, you know, with these projects. Policymakers or funders always like to see why did it work, what did you get from it, if they're going to continue to fund or support going on. So just noting what those benefits will be. Before I let other people come on up, it would be remiss of me, having worked now on Rathlin for for a bit longer, but now really dedicated for a few months to not kind of talk about our islands off the island of Ireland, and just how island communities really, when it comes to ocean literacy, they see the impact of our seas very much more on an intensified level. Obviously, we are on an island as a whole, so we do feel it, but that's really, really ramped up in the kind of daily life on an island community. Every element is impacted by the sea. And likewise, they really see the pressures that are on our marine environment firsthand earlier, whether it's lots of litter washing up on the shorelines, climate change, increased storminess, meaning islanders can't get off and on the island as easily as possible. So it's really just to say, and I really take the earlier point from Emma too, of really reaching to those people that aren't on the coast is absolutely vital, but also really platforming people from all over these island communities, whether it's Rathlin or as you move around to Tory and Achill and keep going, putting them at the forefront of this conversation as well will be really, really important. But yeah, that's, I think, thanks, too quick, no problem.
So if there any, so if any questions or clarifications you want from Erin, we're going to leave the debate, if you like, until all the speakers have spoken. But has anybody any questions that they have for Erin in terms of, okay, all right, thanks. So we're moving on now to Ciara. Ciara, are you using the...
No, I'm just going to talk.
I'm very happy because I was pretty happy with the picture of that.
Okay, thanks so much for inviting me here today to the IOLN. It's really interesting to me because we haven't really done any work on the marine or oceans before. We've focused on some of the waterways like Lough Neagh and illegal dumping and other sort of terrestrial issues. So it's really interesting to see how our work kind of connects into the debates that have been going on around the marine as well. So just by way of introduction, my name's Ciara Brennan. I'm the Director of Environmental Justice Network Ireland. So we started in 2019 as began as an academic network, and then we worked with lawyers and NGOs and grassroots activists from 2019 on. Then we became a registered charity and a company limited by guarantee in 2021. So since then, we've been working together. It's a highly collaborative all-island organisation. We work with, as I said, lawyers, with grassroots activists, with campaigners, with NGOs and other networks, so including IOLN, the Irish Environmental Network, and the Northern Ireland Environment Link. So what we do is produce research, advocacy strategies, and then we undertake some strategic interventions as well to tackle the root causes of environmental injustice on the island, and hopefully now nearly in the seas around it as well. So what I'm going to do very briefly today is talk a bit about our experience of undertaking all-island and cross-border cooperation to address shared environmental challenges. So I'm going to talk about 3 of our projects very briefly, but what you can do, if you have any questions, really happy to answer them. And also all of the stuff that I'm going to reference today is on our website, which is www.ejni.net. So very straightforward to find. So very happy to take questions on any of that. But I think before talking about the 3 projects, it's good to have a think about the challenges that are associated with cooperative work on the island. And it's really interesting because you were saying, as Erin, isn't it, that a lot of what you've said resonates with our work as well. And we did a big project with IOLN and Neil a couple of years ago called Linking the Irish Environment, where we delved into quite a lot of detail about what are the challenges to properly undertaking transboundary, cross-border, all-island cooperation. But for the purposes of today, while we know that the dividends of a collaborative approach to addressing shared environmental challenges are clear, I think it's very obvious why we should be doing this as an island as a whole. It's one biogeographic unit. You can't, rivers don't stop at the borders, that kind of stuff. But I think it is important to really recognise and be realistic about some of the challenges that we're dealing with here. I think the first one is that from a legal perspective, although our regulatory and legal frameworks are underpinned by, well, it was initially EU law and other international obligations, they are completely separate. We have completely separate laws and regulations and policies, and as we heard, strategies as well. I think there probably needs to be more, on a strategy level, you can try to do all island work a bit more easily, but we are dealing with totally separate regulatory systems. Now, the Good Friday Agreement did put in place some excellent structures to allow, and to promote collaboration. The environment was one of the key areas of cooperation that the architects of the Good Friday Agreement foresaw. So there are some excellent cross-border bodies that with probably people in the room representing. But we sort of concluded in that Linking the Irish Environment report that there's more potential within the Good Friday Agreement to establish better cooperation, especially with regards to the environment. So I think we've got the separate regulatory and legal systems, but we also have had extremely problematic implementation of environmental law and regulation on both parts of the island, to the detriment of the island's environment as a whole. I think it's well known that the problems with environmental governance, certainly in the north, and there's been equal issues in the south as well, around water quality, around protection of habitats, around issues like illegal dumping, implementation of climate laws. I mean, you could go on really across most of the different environmental fora. So I think between these separate systems, between the problematic implementation, and then whenever you think about who is actually doing the work here, you've got the governance structures are completely separate as well. So I think Erin was talking about this. It's actually quite hard to find out who your counterpart is if you want to collaborate, because even the departmental arrangements that we have for government, they all have slightly different portfolios, and that means that it's quite hard to actually find out if you want to do cooperation, who do you phone? You can't just phone up your counterpart in the south or the north. So that's been one of the major challenges, and obviously civil society then develops in response to the different, the way it's structured at a government level. So even if you want to collaborate with a civil society organisation in the south, it's quite hard to find out, who to call. So we have been doing projects to kind of address some of these problems over the last few years. So the 3, and I'm going to speak very briefly about them today because a lot of them have resulted in very, very, very big, long, boring technical reports. Not the Linking the Irish Environment. It's fascinating. But The three that I wanted to speak about were the three challenges. It's best to begin really with the challenges. Or first one is post-Brexit regulatory divergence, right? So as we had before, a lot of environmental law came from the EU. So even if they were different, there was a direction of travel. There was a common need to implement EU law. Post-Brexit, there's a risk that that might diverge. What does that mean in practice? Well, if standards increase at EU level and they don't increase in Northern Ireland, we might have different water quality standards in rivers, for example, north and south. You can imagine that that's a problem whenever the rivers just keep on flowing across the border. So what we did with this was we've done a few different reports on this. We worked with IOLN and Neil to do work on post-Brexit divergence and understanding of that in civil society. Who's paying attention to it? Is there any official bodies actually monitoring it? You know, how do we know if divergence happens and what do we do when it does? So there's still ongoing work on that. We've also worked with NIHRC on a report about the Windsor Framework and the environment, which I'll talk about in a second. And then we've done some work on nutrient divergence for the Office of Environmental Protection in the UK Office for Environmental Protection. So we've got bits and pieces of the puzzle, but I think it's safe to say that we know divergence is happening. Like, we know it is because the EU is constantly changing its environmental laws, even if nothing's happening here. It's unclear what that's going to result in. How that's going to manifest is very difficult to predict as well. Could result in different environmental standards. What we do know is that the Windsor Framework, the agreement that was part of the post-Brexit arrangements here, protects citizens in Northern Ireland, but also across the island to some extent, from diminution of rights, and that includes environmental rights. So the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission, the report we did for them, which was published in June, we've said, look, a lot of it's a very, very wide range of environmental rights potentially fall under the scope of the Windsor Framework. So you think about divergence, it's potentially the breadcrumb trail that could lead you to Windsor Framework Agreement diminution of rights, which can be challenged in court. So really, really interesting issues there. This is really topical. It's quite controversial. It's still in the courts. You know, they're dealing with the application of the Windsor Framework. So it's an evolving issue. So that's one set of work that we're doing. And then the next one is about ensuring meaningful public participation in environmental decision making. So an example of this is that we've got loads of rights from the Aarhus Convention, the ESPO Convention, that say, look, you have to do transboundary public consideration. If you're doing something in Northern Ireland that's going to impact across the border, you have to consult the citizens on both sides. Now, we know that's not happening. So it's not happening whenever climate plans are being produced in the south, then the National and Economic and Climate Action Plan in the south, that wasn't consulted on in the north. So we went down to the Oireachtas and said, you need to be consulting people in the north because it's going to have an impact, you know. So we know that that's not happening, but the implications of not doing it properly are quite significant. So I don't know if anybody's aware of the gold mine that's been proposed in the Sparran Mountains, and there was a public inquiry into that, and it collapsed because two fellas from Donegal came over and said, you haven't consulted us. So that's now having real implications on planning processes, on real life decision making around the environment. So we've important rights here and they're not being impacted. And the last one that I wanted to raise was just about the cost of environmental justice. So we've been doing some work with a wide range of lawyers and NGOs from across the island to set up the All Island Strategic Legal Exchange. And we've looked at the procedural costs associated with, you know, taking a case to court. Like, it's different rules for funding and for the costs if you're taking litigation north and south. And that has quite significant impacts because, you know, if you want to, if I live in the north and I want to take a case about something that's happening in the south, am I entitled to cost support, all of these sorts of issues? So we've been doing work on procedural access to justice as well. So thank you very much. Very happy to take questions. And that was quite a lot to get through. So in detail on any more if you want. That's great. Thanks.
Thanks, Ciara. That was really thought-provoking and a good insight into some of the real challenges and where some of the barriers are and how challenging it is to deal with them. Next speaker is Andrew Ward. I've known Andrew for a long time, and actually in a show and development partnership, but actually Andrew started his life at sea fishing, so he also has a knowledge, if you like, from that perspective as well. So, Andrew.
It's great to be here as the token male in the panel. It makes a change. Listen, I suppose Kate gave a bit of a background there. I was originally born in Wicklow. I went to the National Fisheries School in Greencastle. I fished on fishing boats all my life, well, for a large part of my life. I owned my own boat. I was chair of Foyle Fishermen's Co-op. I would have been on the board of Bodie Shkawara, and I would have been one of the original board members in the Locks Agency. So I'm coming to this from a slightly different perspective. And I know already from what I heard this morning that what I had written down and what I will say will probably be completely different. But I remember J.M. Singh, I don't remember, it was a long time ago. I originally came from Wicklow. J.M. Singh wrote in a book that was published just after his death in 1910 that Wicklow was a county that had turned its back to the sea. Well, all I can say is we were a little bit ahead of the curve, because when we got independence, we really did a great job at that. You know, there is a sense of betrayal within fishing communities. I live in a fishing community, and you know, it has lasted from then to now. I'm not going to go through the whole lot, but I'll just give you a simple thing of what's happening today. Today we have the Nitrate Directive, where our government are going to turn inside out in every effort to keep poison in the rivers. No matter what way you put it, that's the height of it. We also have a situation that due to climate change, the mackerel stocks have gone further north, and there are a whole lot of countries which didn't fish them, like Iceland, Norway, Faroes, who are now fishing them, and the stocks have been decimated, and if we're not careful, there'll be a moratorium within 3 years. The mackerel stock is vital to the whole economy in Southwest Donegal. You just watch the space on RTE, on anything to do with politics in Ireland, on which gets the most airtime between now and then. So we haven't changed. We have been blinded to the sea. Now, not taken away from that, and I know, you know, when I did finally give up fishing, I was very lucky. One of the first people I met was Kate Burns. And I actually don't agree with something she said earlier, which wouldn't be the first time. She said about projects, you know, that she was involved in and we were involved in, and not having a legacy. I remember one of the first projects, and it came from Kate, was the European Celtic Maritime Festival of the Sea. And it was the first time, in my mind, the foil was used properly in relation to tourism, in relation to that type of stuff. We brought the tall ships up, and there was a number of events and things. But to my mind, it was the forerunner to the clipper. It was the forerunner to Derry using the foil as it is now, even in the Halloween and one thing and another. So I think it had a legacy. Another project we actually did was to do with young people and speaking in their language. Was Football for Peace, which is still going on in another thing. But anyway, that's just a minor thing. I work for Inishowen Development Partnership. I'm joint CEO. Inishowen, by the name, you know, we are very much involved in the sea and linking with the sea. I just want to go back one little thing that I should have said. One of the things, this thing is about cross-border cooperation, and the Locks Agency at that time, we got the money off them in relation to getting the tall ships, and the idea of cross-border cooperation is very important. I look at the time here, I better go quick. We have had numbers of projects in relation to cross-border projects. I'm skipping half the things I'm saying now. One of the things we're looking at the moment is it's the Healthy Active Rural Communities, and it's looking at, we have, among other things, there's the blue and the green, and Inishowen is looking at the blue area. It's a cross-border Peace Plus project, 7.6 million, involving Inishowen, Derry, and the Derg area. There's 3,200 young people in summer activities, which would include kayaking, pier swimming, surfing, those types of things. Somebody mentioned Blue Care. Blue Care therapy, there's 575 people in Blue Care therapy, which, you know, paddleboarding, kayaking again, swimming and stuff like that. So it's kind of using the sea in relation to our health, nature, well-being, and that type of stuff. Going back, we have, like Inishowen Adventures, I don't know if you know it, we would have helped it got up and running. There was a rowing cross-border interterritorial between Islay. Islay is 35 miles away from where I am. So there would have been rowing between Ireland and between Islay and Ireland, men and women. We would have supplied boats and that type of stuff. We would have had Amazing Grace, which looks at dolphins and does that type of stuff. We've a number of small fishing boats. We would have been very involved in the beginning in the Maritime Museum in Greencastle. Now, the Maritime Museum, just to give you an idea, I remember, when they went house to house looking for money to get it up and started and running. It's a community venture. I remember I had a fishing boat at the time when I was chair of the Fishermen's Co-op, and all the boats putting money into it to make it happen. And it's the type of thing that, it's local communities doing what they're doing. And I have said very little about a number of projects that I was going to speak about, but we have been involved in projects where we're looking at young people and involving them with science and with themselves, where we've had, one thing was involved tracking basket sharks, following the basket sharks, each community in primary school owning the basket shark effectively and watching where they're going. We've looked at people, students 16, that gap out year, where they're doing 10-week courses in marine science activities, going out on vessels. And I am over time. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrew. And I think that's just a great example, if you like, of where a fishing community itself has been involved and led by the concept of community partnership and rural partnership, which brings in everything there from the heritage and the economics to human health. And it was actually also reflecting back on Hugh's comment about mental health. And actually it's been one of those wonderful things to see the growth in coastal rowing and coastal swimming. And sometimes we underestimate the value of all those community-driven activities and festivals and so on that have done so much in recent years to raise awareness. Andrew, I think you've stolen my papers.
Those are my notes, actually.
I don't want to get the order wrong here with my speakers here. So so our next speaker is Aoife Laughlin from Irish Environment Network. You're using the...
Yes, I'm it.
Okay, grand job. All right.
Great. Hello, everybody. First of all, thank you so much to the organisers for inviting me here today to talk about our work on cross-border or all-island cooperation. First of all, to introduce myself and the Irish Environmental Network. So my name is Aoife Laughlin and I work in policy and advocacy in the Irish Environmental Network. The network itself is if you like, an umbrella group for national environmental NGOs in the Republic of Ireland. We're made up of, as of this week, 41 national ENGOs that work across every conceivable environmental topic that you could think of. We have a member working there, and they range from sort of large or larger multi-staffed organisations to organisations which are heavily dependent on volunteers and maybe one or two person outfits. Those that cover broad topics and then those that are perhaps species specific. So we really are quite a diverse network from that perspective. We also have members in every part of the country. So, the challenge for us is then serving a membership that is so diverse. And we concentrate, we are predominantly a capacity building organisation. So our aim is to support all kinds of activities in the sector. But then we also have a policy and advocacy arm or wing called the Environmental Pillar. There's a very complicated history as to why we have two brands, and I won't go into it now, but we do. And so most of our members, I'd say probably 90%, are also involved in joint advocacy and policy development. So that's the way in which we cooperate together. We've been working on an all-island basis or cooperating with colleagues in Northern Ireland for many years now, at least 2014, well before my time anyway. We have a memorandum of understanding with Northern Ireland Environment Link, and then we've worked, as Ciara said there earlier, we've worked on a number of occasions with EJNI, mostly looking at how we grapple with the post-Brexit environment. However, what I want to focus on today is a particular project which is about activating and supporting people to work, civil society specifically, to work on an all-island basis. This is a project that we ran over a series of about 18 months. It's called the All-Island Civil Society Forum on the Environment. I'm really hoping someone in the room was there. We're very lucky to get funding from the Shared Island Civic Society Fund. And at the time we got it, the Irish government was, doing all of these dialogues, promoting dialogue, but they tended to be cross-sectoral and a number of them, very expert heavy. So we decided what we wanted to do was to have a forum that was a bit more open to people with different levels of expertise and who were perhaps, predominantly from civil society. What we aimed to do as well is to make sure that we were inclusive. So we had 5 online thematic dialogues and then 1 in-person networking day, which was really focused on trying to get people together. Because it's great to meet online, but where are the connections really made? They're probably made over the coffee break. So that was, a huge part of our aim with that. We were very lucky. We had managed to get 250 participants from Kerry to Leitrim and up to Antrim. And we focused very much on, it was a very practical discussion, like what can we do to improve cooperation? How can we support civil society in all-island cooperation, and actually what kinds of things do we need to be focusing on? And you can see the themes we had there, and the third one was on the marine or shared seas. And just very quickly, this was the sort of how we conducted the online dialogue. So you can see there a screenshot from the marine one. What we did was we set the scene with expert voices and also with sort of policy experts, one from the north and one from the south, to make sure that everybody had some kind of knowledge or a scene setting going into the dialogue. They were followed by dialogues with facilitated questions and answers. And we were very clear that we wanted it to be open to anyone who sort of considers themselves part of civil society, whether you're a lone activist or part of a professionalised NGO. So these are the sort of findings and recommendations that our participants agreed or came up with on sort of the more general question of post-Brexit cooperation and environmental government. So the sort of work that Ciara was talking about there. And surprise, surprise, shared information, understanding the regulatory environment, all of those issues are very, very high up on people's concerns. And prerequisites for good environmental cross-border or all-island cooperation, communication, public engagement, and funding and resources, again, not a surprise given the sector in general. But I just want to talk a little bit, well, not talk, but just draw your attention to some of the findings around that came out of the marine dialogue and then the in-person networking day. So, I mean, the very first one was continue the dialogue, which we will. But I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But then, developing all-island approaches, and when participants were saying develop all-island approaches, they mean within civil society as well as within, let's say, government. Then the practical collaboration around mapping and data gathering, citizen science, the more of this that can be done on an all-island basis, the better. And another really interesting one, managing tensions between sectors, which comes up a lot. And one of the aims of this particular project was that we would identify these shared challenges and also, you know, what the barriers were and where there are shared opportunities. And one of the sort of the shared challenges was, you know, managing those tensions, for example, between ORE and protecting the marine environment. So, you know, a wide range of sort of issues, findings and recommendations that our participants came up with. So I'm running out of time now. So literally all I'm going to say here is we also talked about, you know, how you develop a vision, what your vision should include. You know, it shouldn't include just transition, it should be communities, intergenerational was an important one. And then, you know, what kind of values do we want to promote with our collaboration? Inclusivity, equality, listening, trust, bravery. I mean, probably all very obvious, but you know, can't be said too often. And I think I'm over my time. Thank you.
Thanks very much. It's actually really heartening just as you sit here and listen to the scope and the scale of work that's being done across a number of forums, and not duplicatory either, but really complementary, and the efforts that people are going to on the cross-border front as well. So Sarah McLean from Lochs Agency, you're next up.
Thank you for including my slides, and I was really, really late sending them in my typical disorganised manner. Hi everyone, my name is Sarah McLean. I'm Head of Science at Lochs Agency. A little bit about me. I'm a zoologist by trade, but I think really I'm an old school ecologist. I just really like animals and nature. But that's not enough. And I feel the need to be in a position to try and inform policy and to be impactful. And that's sort of why I'm working for the agency. I've been with the agency since 2011, and it was my 3 to 5 year plan. So that just tells you about how exciting and diverse and interesting it is to work in the cross-border sphere. So Lochs Agency is a cross-border body. We're the original cross-border body, and we've been in existence since 1952. And at that point in time, we were the Foyle Fisheries Commission. We're joint funded by the North and the South, and that was set up under the Good Friday Agreement, Belfast Agreement. And we're funded 50-50 by DERA and DCEE in the South. The unique thing about the agency is that we have 2 pieces of legislation that are complementary and identical, North and South. And we've touched already today about the need for kind of complementary legislation, North and South. And it's great, and I'm not taking away from the fact that it's great, but actually in the realms of what we do at Lochs Agency, particularly in the realms of salmon management, essentially what it does is creates a 3rd jurisdiction. So you end up with 3 different sets of management on the one island. And when you start to think about divergence, that becomes more of a risk. And we've seen it already. Foyle and Carlingford, particularly Foyle, are not adequately represented in either the marine plan or the National Marine Planning Framework in the South. So you do end up in a situation where you sort of end up with a 3rd jurisdiction. So I think it's a kind of a careful what you wish for sort of thing occasionally. That's maybe a slightly negative to start with. Lochs Agency originally was set up to deal with, the Foyle Fisheries Commission was originally set up to deal with issues around commercial salmon fishing, because at that point in time, commercial salmon fishing was a very, very lucrative industry. Nowadays, what we do at Lochs Agency is conserve the few salmon that we have left. And I think actually it's a sort of a microcosm of sort of shifting perspectives and relationships that people have with the sea over the last, even that has changed over the last 70 years. This is our mission and our vision, and these both demonstrate our values when it comes to management, conservation and promotion of Foyle and Carlingford. And I think actually they're a really useful mission and vision because it take into account the different ways that people connect with these environments and these catchments. And these are our catchments. I don't know how clearly you can see that on that. We have just over 4,500 square kilometres of catchment and 12 nautical miles out to sea. What we do is we manage these catchments on an ecosystem-based approach. So we're not just looking at single components, but we're looking at how all the elements of the ecosystems interact together. And we use catchment-wide managements. We are not defined by the jurisdictional borders. We are managing the catchments as a whole, and we sort of think of them as single bioregions or single units. The only time we really consider what jurisdiction we're in is what currency we use when we stop the shop for lunch. But I think it's about understanding that these are bioregions and understanding the linkages between the realms, and maybe that's something we can talk a little bit more today about, how the freshwater communities can also be linked with the marine environment, because everything is interconnected. And just a little bit about our operational structure. So all that we do is grouped into these kind of 5 directorates. All the conservation and management decisions are underpinned by the science. And again, evidence-based approach based on an ecosystem-based approach. But all that requires explanation. It requires some way of translating complex science to our stakeholders in a way that shows that our management is fair and equitable, and that it's taking into account not just the ecosystem, but the societal impact and how the anthropogenic elements of all that we're doing in terms of management. And I think the days of we're the competent authority, do as we say, are done. We can't do all of this on our own, and that's why we need to be connected to our stakeholders and connected to other decision makers. And I'll stop there, but because I could go on forever.
Thanks. So I think we've had a really good picture of some good news stories and some great work that's being done, and also some pretty fundamental challenges in this work. I mean, one of the takeaways is the fact that projects are happening, like the All Ireland, the work on terns and RSPB and Birdwatch Ireland and partners. And when you hear about work on the justice side of things, and then from Andrew's side, you hear about actually from a real delivering ocean literacy, that actually that kind of community partnership is doing it and doing it really well, and that the fishing community is involved. Also the challenges, and we've heard them several times of Brexit, and I know from sitting on some of the fishery side of things that Brexit has had the potential to cause greater relationship breakdown within the fishing industry, north and south. Brexit's been really bad news from a relationship perspective, north and south, and how do you deal with that? However, you know, we also heard that, you know, within the Good Friday Agreement, for example, there is the facility, there is the potential to address some of those structural barriers. I mean, I think the challenges, and these are the questions, if you like, that I would now put to the floor and to the panel. Well, one is, it's the obvious one in this room, is how do we bring more of those people who are key stakeholders into this conversation? So, you know, particularly thinking about membership of the IOLN and just to engage more. What's the best way to do that? And then also around some of those really challenging barriers, can people think of solutions? You know, are there ideas around the, you know, where policy perhaps opportunities to bring some of those things together? What needs to happen? And let's be brave in this conversation, because there's nothing to stop us saying really what we think would be a good idea. It doesn't mean it could be delivered, but actually just expressing what those ideas are. And also just reflect also on the value of community in this, because we've heard throughout community knowledge, community passion, where we've seen literacy improve has been the festivals, has been the heritage events, has been coastal rowing, has been that. And, you know, perhaps we really, because it's not official, it's something that just happens, we sometimes maybe just don't measure the true value and the opportunity that's within that. But I'm going to kind of put out the first question then, if somebody would like to explore this further or pose a question to some of the panel, is around how we involve more stakeholders from fishing community, from tourism, if you like, from the maritime business end of things. So would anybody like to pick on that one? I can always pick on a panel member, but it would be really nice to hear from somebody on the floor as well. Well, while yeah, go ahead, Heidi. Yeah.
Thank you to all of the panelists. It's been really great to hear about all the different pieces of work that you're doing. Thinking from the IOLN perspective, we've heard about how policy can be a help and a hindrance, and also that there's been perhaps a reliance on passion and community sectors or conservation sector. So do you think that having maybe at an all-island strategy level, an ocean literacy strategy, the way that we're kind of seeing them be developed in Wales and England, could be beneficial and perhaps a way to bring that wider sector in? Or are we better to just keep it as, practical on the ground type work?
That's a really good question. I mean, I suppose, the on-the-ground work is what's happening now and it's successful. But yes, if there was something at a strategy level that there was buy-in, could that potentially address? So, sorry, I think I met my mic. Oh, right. So, Erin, yeah.
Yes, no, just thinking on that. Obviously, working in policy, it's always strategies and consultations and action plans, and these pieces come up time and time again. And what I find when trying to connect to wider groups, different stakeholders, and then also really kind of the core group, which is just like people who don't feel maybe connected to the sea in their day-to-day life, more marginalised communities, working class communities in Ireland. Sometimes these strategies, they feel like that's none of their business in a way, or it's, there's no ownership there, or it seems like a policy thing is inaccessible in a way. I definitely think we need something that drives it, but I don't know if it's. I really loved the kind of element of the civic forum and what that stood for, and it would be interesting to see the legacy of that and what's next. But I just think with any of these strategies, it's making sure you've got actions tied to them, but also making a massive element of it. We know in this room, a lot of us, that the ocean being in a healthy state is absolutely vital for the rest in a healthy, thriving society. But for people day to day who are thinking maybe about their month, not being able to eat at the end of the month, rent, all that, it just seems so separate. So anything that we do on that level, any strategy, I think that needs to be a focus of it, that human element more so. So yes, something there, but maybe it's a different word, or it's a more accessible forum would be a brilliant start anyway.
Andrew and then.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very good question. Well, I would be more inclined towards actually doing than the strategy. Just that's where I would come from. But I think, what can you add to the table? What can you bring to the table? Now, if, let's say, we're trying to develop a project and we're looking at partners, whoever they are, I think with the knowledge that's in this room, if you're linking that in, I mean, I was in Dublin Castle, the shared island, and Mian Martin was talking about the story of the people. Well, the story of the marine, make sure that we get it out. But I think if we could link even with yourself, I'm on about local actors, do you know what I mean? Can work with yourselves and others in partnership. There's a lot you can bring to the table. You can help us, and you can help even professionalising in relation to applications and stuff like that. So I think that could be great benefit to communities. We can bring in the communities. We can do that part. But sometimes the other part, I think there's a great potential there to actually make something happen. And I'm not so sure about the strategy, but I'm very sure about making something happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said to be brave now, so it's okay for me to say slightly controversial things. So I think one of the things, just when I was listening to some of the other presentations, is that the fact that there's 2 jurisdictions on the island has probably been a contributing factor to how we're not thinking about ourselves as an island as a whole. So I think when you're developing things around the ocean, the idea of us as an island, that yes, we've probably got loads of strategies and things like that, but probably one of the most important things is to have more all-island strategies, rather than just separate strategies, north and south, because that's just going to preserve the separation of about how people think about the environment. It's one biogeographic unit. Like, you have to have shared strategies to deal with those shared challenges. So not more strategies, but more all-island strategies would probably be what I would support.
Thanks, Sarah.
I think what Ciara said is pretty much exactly what I was about to say. I think we have lots of strategies, lots of policies, we have lots of bits and pieces of things on paper. I think we're thinking too small. I think we're thinking too local. And the ocean is a perfect example to go big. And to show how it's all connected. We need to start thinking about the ocean the way that animals think about the ocean, not the way that people think about the ocean. There's a brilliant map, which I should have probably put on a slide, which is a view of the world where the water is the centre, not the land. And I think that's how we need to start thinking about the ocean the way that animals do.
Thank you, Sarah. Aoife?
Yeah, I think that's on, yeah. When it comes to environmental matters, I do think, or challenges, the more all-island strategy and thinking and cooperation, the better, for all the reasons that everybody have said. And again, I agree, there's an awful lot with speakers saying we're just, there are many, many strategies, overlapping strategies, and also there are very many dialogues. And one of the problems that you often get is, are they actually dialogues, or especially if they come from the top down, if they come from government? And I know that perhaps some of you may have been involved recently in consultation around the NBAP, the National Biodiversity Strategy in the Republic. And I didn't attend these, but what I heard back from my colleagues, is very much that you go along to these dialogues, you sit in a room, you spill your guts out, with people sometimes from your sector, sometimes it's cross-sectoral, and then you go away, and what's the result really at the end? You never really see the impact on what comes out. So I'm also really in favour of more dialogue. Dialogue is a funny word because it just sounds like chat. One of the challenges we have with the next stage of our civil society forum is, what next? Like, we can't keep dragging people to dialogues without some kind of action or something tangible, coming out of it. So that is, when you run events like that, that's always your next question, and probably the most difficult question. And if anyone has ideas, you said open up,
Well,
give the audience a question. Yeah, how do you, ensuring that follow up is valuable for all the participants is actually quite difficult, especially when the participation is diverse.
Indeed. Well, there's the question back. Does somebody want to come in and give some thoughts about this? There's a lady here, and Bob.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Catherine Mary Crowley, and I came up from Kerry, and I'm an artist and writer. And while I wouldn't look to any government for progress, I would look to creativity and more connectivity for sure. And what I've observed is a lack of simplicity. I would love to see one idea. I'm getting really nervous now, my belly is kicking. That's very funny. I read poetry, and it's not a problem, but my knees are knocking now, just chatting to you. One message, if we had one message, look at no, mo, may. People stopped trying to turn roundabout grass into a golf course and pruning nature to make the whole country look like a suburban lawn. And look what happened. It's fantastic. And many people were like, oh, sure, that's obvious, but isn't it lovely? And it was intergenerational. And Europe has an aging population. Some elders aren't being included. Some elders aren't even being acknowledged about the trauma of COVID. they no longer socialise as much. You need to consult the artists more, especially those of us who don't want to apply for funding through Creative Ireland while the government simultaneously erects new data centres. And that's all I'll say about that. In the words of Forrest Gump, isn't it? But if we had one message, imagine designing a calendar of events with one aim per season. In spring, we're going to look at microplastics and connect it to your belly and your food. I've loads more ideas, but you need to pay me as a consultant for that. That's not a joke. It's really hard. I can't wait to chat with you more, but I vote for simplicity and one message for the whole country, and just give it a go and review it the next season and then do something else. Thank you.
That was a really nice intervention, actually, and coming up from Kerry as well, really appreciate it. And I think there's an important message there, because if you do look at the awareness about the ocean, a lot of it has come actually from some amazing media programmes. We've had some incredible documentaries in the last few years, which have probably done as much for ocean literacy as more formal channels. And in a way, what you're talking about there is the simplicity of the message that touches people, and actually not forgetting people at all across the spectrum of life. Erin.
Yeah, it was just to come back on that and say I couldn't agree more. When we think about the ocean, even for myself, it can be really overwhelming sometimes, all the pressures, all the different challenges. Where do you start? But we as a nation are a storytelling nation. Art, music, creativity is at the core of what we do. And it is how we have and continue to spread messaging in the most effective way. And I think we've all seen that with the seas. You know, everybody always points to Blue Planet, but even in recent years, some incredible documentaries about our seas, about people who live around the coast, about people who are connected to the seas on BBC, RTE, all these channels. And those are the things that I hear people who I maybe don't think about the sea in the same way I do daily as part of life coming to me and saying, oh, did you see that great show? Or did you see the basking sharks on RT the other night? And that's what really gets people excited. So I think there really is something to that. It's challenging, where do you start? But we know our oceans are so interconnected. So if you dive in there and you either pick a species, you pick a real kind of challenge, if it's marine protected areas, that will start to drive recovery. And at this stage, we have to do something in that way. We have to start moving and getting people connected. So I think there's definitely something in that.
Thanks. Another comment or question? Bob.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. I just want to build on a point that Sarah made that I think is absolutely fundamental. And I want to build a little bit on that, because I think it's sort of slithered through without perhaps being picked up more strongly. And that is the idea of looking at our marine life and our oceans from the point of view of the ocean rather than the land-based thing. And in that sense, it almost throws out a challenge to the title of this panel. What does collaboration look like on the ground? I would argue that it's what it's got to look like in the water. If, for example, Erin has talked about the metapopulation of terns moving up and down our coasts. You could also say the same thing for our seals as well. I mean, County Down seals turn up in the Clyde, that sort of thing. And basking sharks, we know where they are sometimes of the year, but they have enormous migrations. And then Andrew talked about the way climate change has influenced the mackerel stocks, changing the whole fishing regime in the northwest. And again, that's from an oceanic point of view. Then we come to your point, Kate, which was, well, how do we get more interests, more diverse interests involved in this whole process? Well, at the risk of reinventing the wheel, it's got to come from looking at it from the perspective of the seas and the oceans. And an example I'll give of that was sadly, it doesn't operate now due to sort of university budget politics, but the University of Liverpool established a thing called the Irish Sea Forum. And it pulled in interests from Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, Isle of Man, Wales, Scotland as well. And because of the dialogue that was taking place there, based on the Irish Sea, it brought in fishing interests, it brought in shipping interests, military interests, would you believe, even, because there are exercise areas in the Clyde and so on. In other words, it actually was able to pull in quite a diversity of interests, much more than I suspect we have here today. And it was doing so because as it looked at the whole system from the point of view of the sea, rather than looking at it from the land outwards. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. So I suppose one of the questions on the back of that came from Heidi, is, you know, you have the Ocean Literacy Network. You obviously had that forum in the past. Would it be possible to create it again? Would it address also the ocean issues for the West and the Northwest, which are not in the Irish Sea? Is the strategy that Heidi was asking about, would that create the forum to bring in more people, do we think?
I was thinking about that as Emma was giving the talk this morning. It's going, strategy, is strategy what we need? I mean, by what Bob says, actually, yeah, what we probably need is a strategy for the Irish Sea and a strategy for the Atlantic rather than nation-based strategies. But a couple of things sprung to mind. One is that people are consulted to death at this stage for endless strategies and policies and plans. We have endless strategies, policies and plans, many of them partially or almost not at all implemented, sitting on shelves. I kind of come across this in citizen science networks as well, with people who talk about doing citizen science, and then there's people who do it. I'd like to think the Irish Ocean Literacy Network do ocean literacy, and I kind of like that idea. And I'm a bit loath to go down the path of strategizing too much. We have a strategy, but it's kind of light touch. I'd rather see us continue networking around the coast, running our regional meetings, getting people, a lot of it is just getting a mixture of people locally within communities under the one roof to talk about the sea. And that's what we've been doing. And you never know where it's going to lead. But some of the outcomes are quite interesting. And actually, in the terms of art integration into all this, we were having a discussion just last night at the board of the Irish Ocean Literacy Network about running an art and literacy focused regional meeting in the Southwest next year. So we're coming your direction. Yeah, I think we should just keep doing ocean literacy and maybe leave the strategizing to others.
Andrew.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to go back to something that you said, Kate. You talked about the documentary films, you know, I might be the Atlantean in that film. But, I mean, there's a good case. I don't know if anyone gets an opportunity to go on YouTube and look at the Fogo process. In 1968, there's an island off Newfoundland, and I had an opportunity to go there and speak to people there and be there. And the Prime Minister Smallwood told the people to burn their boats or sink them, that the island was being uninhabited, that they were taken, it couldn't afford to keep them. And there was a bunch of filmmakers who effectively went to film the death of the island, but they were radical young men, and there were 11 small villages within the island, and they're the same composition as Ireland. Some were Presbyterian, some were Church of Ireland, some were Catholic, and you had all that thing. So he got the people together, and through filming each and every individual and then shown it in the other areas, they began to realize that they had similar problems. And they centralized their healthcare system, they centralized their education system into the center of the island. They set up a boat builders co-op, they set up a fishermen's co-op. I was lucky to be invited to go there and see them. Today, there are as many people living on Fogo Island as all the Gaeltacht islands in Ireland put together. They are thriving. They're doing very, very well. Now, there's a big story there, you know, about Zeta Cobb and all that stuff there, stuff that happened. But at the end of the day, it was the effect of filmmaking And we talked about the arts earlier. People go all over the world. They have artists in residence, beautiful places where people come and do art there. And we look at Tory Island, for example, where you have the Tory artists. We don't make anything of it. But I just think we live on an island. The problems that we have, other communities have had before, you know, and we don't have to reinvent everything. We do have to look at what other people are doing and see how we can modify them to our situation.
Thanks very much, Sarah, and then Erin.
I think maybe just to, because we're kind of a couple of different threads here, and something that's in my head to maybe pull these things together is that there is a need to kind of conceptualize or contextualize this kind of very complex environment. The marine environment is very complicated. There's a lot going on. It's a bit out of sight, out of mind for a lot of people. So if they haven't got a way of picturing it in their head, it makes it very difficult. And that's why the likes of the documentaries give people a connection. One of the things that I want to very briefly talk about, which is science and technology around the ocean. And I think, admittedly, as a scientist, we'll put our hands up and say there's probably a fair amount of gatekeeping goes on around that information. But one of the things that's a big deal in Europe at the minute that Locke's agency is working on a number of projects that can contribute to is what's called the digital twin of the ocean. And the idea of DTOs is to kind of bring together all of the elements of the ocean, oceanographics, things like animal movements, marine spatial planning, bringing all of those things together in a digital model, which allows the observer to look at the sea as a digital model, as a singular piece, and sort of play around with it in terms of scenarios. So what happens if you build a wind farm here? What happens if the ocean current here moves 100 kilometres to the north? That sort of thing. And it allows people to look at the whole ocean or sections of the ocean in a much more holistic viewpoint. And I think we're talking about a couple of different things here. So we're talking about dialogue and we're talking about strategy, but I don't think we're really understanding the advancements in technology and modelling that are happening at the minute, and we need to get a way to bring that into the conversation. Ciara.
Oh, yeah. Just a very quick last one. I think the idea of the regional meetings around the coast and filling in those gaps is really, really important, because I think sometimes people, especially the out of sight, out of mind thing, if you're not living on the coast, like, it's really only things that are going to affect you that you can be like, oh, that's just down the road, you know, that are going to engage people and those wider stakeholders. Like, you know, we go to the Donegal in the summers up to Falcara, and we go to that brilliant beach at Drumnachinny, the big long one, absolutely beautiful, pristine, one of the most beautiful beaches in Ireland. And we all got sick after swimming there after a storm in the summer because there was outflow from the sewage. And I thought, no, hold on, that can't be right, you know. But then a report came out about a month ago that said, I think it's 40 locations around the island are still just pumping raw sewage straight into the sea, and Falcara is one of them. So we didn't know that, but I'm animated about it now. And, you know, and we're going to write a series of strongly worded letters, because when we looked into it, we found that it's because there's processes in place to build sewage infrastructure, but they're not going to start it till 2030. Like, why? You know, why do we have to wait for 5 more years? So I think if people knew more about that, they would get animated, they'd be interested in developing their ocean literacy. But it's those regional meetings that are going to kind of expose the issues that are, you know, local and that people are going to care about. So I think it's a brilliant strategy to keep going round and have them fill in all those gaps, you know.
Thank you. I'm just going to try and summarise. Oh, sorry. One.
So, Robert Keneally, I'm from Connemara, not an island, but sometimes it feels like it is. Grew up from a 3rd or 4th generation fishing. We've a 100-year curragh, and now I'm a captain offshore, building oil and gas, wind farms, all that kind of stuff. Echo exactly what Andrew says. We are sea blind. Absolutely. And the mackerel stock, I was up in a job there recently with a load of guys from Orkney, and they were showing TikTok videos of, I think it was 2.4 million in one net worth of a cost of mackerel. But to go to your one about bringing in the commercial side, there's a very good conference that Simply Blue, that are part of the Irish Ocean Literacy Network, run, the Seafarers Conference, that's on every March. That started to bring in the fishermen, and it was done with the wind farms in mind and how that's going to impact. And that has led on to a working group with the Marine Institute, the representatives of the Irish fishermen groups from around the country, in the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment, or the communications. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's one of those. But just leading on from that, for you guys, the biggest divisive thing we're going to have in the Irish seas is going to be offshore wind. What's your view? And I'm known for asking awkward questions as well when I go to conference.
Yeah, I just to say, so this is really good because actually we've lunch coming up soon, so we could talk about that for a long time. Andrew, you're
Well, I'm saying it depends how you go about it. I mean, I know that Killybegs Fishermen's Organisation, because I had a meeting with them and I brought the German ambassador to meet them, and we had a roundtable meeting about offshore wind and what they were proposing. I think the fishermen need to be centrally involved. I think the idea, you know, the fish stocks, who owns them? In Europe, we have regional policy, and I give them Tory Island again, fisheries policy. People in Tory Island have no fishing rights. And yet we've a regional policy is a cornerstone of the Treaty of Rome. It's ridiculous. So the wind that blows off our coast is the resource of the people in the area. And the fishermen who are you know, central to that need to be part of the solution. They need to be built in the beginning, and they need to be stakeholders. And if you do it from that perspective, you'll be successful. And the only thing I can give in relation to this is, if you look at oil, in Norway, when they produced that oil, when they did it themselves, for every barrel of oil that was produced in Norway, the Norwegian people got twice the value as what they got in Britain in the North Sea. It's because the people themselves were an integral part of it. And if you go from that perspective, I think it'll be okay. And if you don't, you're going to have a curb situation in North Mayo everywhere.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to, quick point and a quick plug. I'll do the plug first. The plug is for a project that's being run by the Irish Environmental Network, and it's called Marera. And this is looking at exactly that. So it's a 3-year project looking at how we resolve the tensions between offshore wind and other uses of the marine. And in particular, because we're an environmental organisation, marine protection and biodiversity. So a lot of this project is looking at is actually funding of research, gathering more scientific data. The first paper that will be published very soon is looking at gaps. So the project, you know, and this is where the point is, post-plug, is coming from the perspective that we should we really be developing straight away without the knowledge that we need to do this safely, with a mind on equality as well, making sure communities are involved, making sure we have all the right data. We have a member group, for example, Birdwatch, who you probably all know, who, you know, are collecting data on, you know, they have the bird air, the IBAs for, so they're very concerned with how renewables, offshore renewables will impact on birds and migratory patterns, etc. And you know more about this than me. But I suppose my point is, if we can't feed that into government, and if they're not going to take that on board for their planning processes and their strategies, then you know, that's a bit of a problem.
Erin and then Sarah.
Yeah, it was just to really quickly say, obviously offshore wind is incredibly vital, and it will be our, you know, hopefully that future energy source. That's why it's all the more important that every stakeholder, nature, people are involved in the process. I think a lot of people don't realise how much wind is intending to go into the Irish Sea and down the east coast of Ireland. It's almost just a line is the plans at the moment, that if not done correctly can be alarming for a lot of reasons. And I touched on the turns as well. That's their network, and it can't be a network for everything. The real challenge we have with offshore is that balance of the pace of wanting to get it in the water and the time to do it correctly. But the positive is it's not in the water yet. And in Ireland, both north, south, we can really lead an example, whereas you've seen offshore wind go in elsewhere, and there hasn't been good engagement with the fishing communities. There hasn't been good engagement with shipping or with nature as well as a really vital element of that. And it's backfired. But there needs to be so much more consideration around that area. And that's where the marine planning side of things as well comes into it as well.
Sarah?
Another very quick project plug. We've a project just about to start called Mosaic. It's to do with multidisciplinary observations in the ocean. And one of the big focuses on that is tracking of migratory and highly mobile species. And this is relatively new technology, and therefore our understanding of how animals are using those seascapes where these proposed developments are is limited. And it's not to say that it will necessarily be an interaction, but it is something we need to understand. And the onus cannot only be on the research community to find out this information. There needs to be an onus on developers as well to help to provide evidence bases.
Thanks very much. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the interesting things coming out of your questions and your intervention was reference to the Seafarers Conference. And I went back at the beginning saying, how do we bring more people into the room? Maybe it's us not going into the room, maybe us finding the other rooms we need to go into. And taking advantage of things like Seafarers Conference and other forum where these very topical debates and presenting the network as a resource, as a valuable resource. And not carrying any particular agenda other than ocean literacy. So I think that's one piece out of this in terms of the stakeholders. Also, another piece that came out of this was very much about taking a sea-focused view on things, that, you know, the sea needs to be at the core thinking and the planning of addressing the many challenges. On the wind power and so on, and the planning and reflecting on, you know, Hugh's contribution around the survey work being done. Marine spatial planning was kicked off really in response to offshore wind proposals 25 years ago in the US. UNESCO have done great guidelines to them, and the best marine spatial planning policies absolutely depend on data and good science and thoughtful policy. And the third pillar is community. You don't do it just with science and policy. So again, perhaps on that topic, it's kind of looking again at where the policy can opportunities to foster policy coming together, north and south, that we think about these things in a holistic way. So I may have missed other bits and pieces. Oh yes, finally, on the final word, storytelling, art and music. These are things which are intrinsically embedded in our society, north and south, and never forgetting the value and the use that they can be as we go out to tell our story. So thank you very much, panel. It's just been absolutely brilliant. Really enjoyed the conversation, and thank you very much to everybody in the audience.